In less than 2 months, we'll be going back to the Chapter 2 map and reliving Fortnite Chapter 2, or the first 3 seasons of it. I guess we're just skipping the last 5, which is a shame because I really would have liked to go back to season 7 and 8, but I'm sure some of you are happy that we're skipping the second half of Chapter 2 for obvious reasons. Anyway, I wanted to take a look into what we could be getting with OG Chapter 2, my hopes for this season, and how Epic can avoid some of the problems from last year's OG season, which, yes, was amazing in its own right, but still had some issues. So what exactly went wrong with Fortnite OG Chapter 1? Well, starting off with the map, there were just some weird inconsistencies. The big building in Tilted, you might know it as Trump Tower, oddly enough was not on the map. The big house in Fatal was replaced by a replica of the barn. Same thing happened with some of the houses in Snobby. It's not the end of the world, it's just strange, but it did start to get bad with the season 7 and 8 update. Not including half of the snow biome and the entirety of the jungle biome is one thing, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they specifically brought back the pirate camps from season 8, and they were just the same prefab all over the map, and in some cases not even in the right location. Now back to the snow and jungle biomes, the new version of Loot Lake, the futuristic POIs, and the season X rift zones. Epic took a certain approach when it came to the map changes in the OG season, being that they're starting with the season 5 map and only adding to it, not removing, which in turn led to some pretty boring map updates. I'm sure some people were happy that we didn't have to experience this again. Fucking taco time! But what ended up happening was season 5 was a pretty faithful recreation, and all the other seasons just felt like season 5 with the few extra items and vehicles. And looking at the loot pool, it just was not accurate. Don't get me wrong, this season was great. It was fun. Everyone had a blast playing Fortnite with the boys in November of 2023. But if Epic is advertising to go back to Fortnite Chapter 1 and relive seasons 5 through 10, they should deliver that. So something like the Heavy Sniper, for example, that was introduced in season 5 wasn't even in the OG season 5 week, but instead it got unvaulted for the seasons 9 and X week. I'm not saying it had to be exact. Yes, it's great that not once we had to lay our eyes upon the bottle rockets again. And I know that the loot pools in Chapter 1 were kind of all over the place and way messier compared to the ones we have now. But it's just weird how a lot of the stuff was unvaulted or vaulted out of order, which Epic even acknowledged. And there were some classic items that we didn't even get to see come back, like the revolver. Some of these exclusions are justified, like the guided missile not being brought back because that was removed from the files entirely since it had so many issues. But then there's stuff like the slurp juice, which was in every season of Chapter 1. And before you say it got buffed in Chapter 4, it's basically a completely different item and extremely OP, Epic went out of their way to change item stats or even create duplicates of items so that they could have different stats specifically for this season. The burst AR, for example, is very different to what it was in Chapter 1, but Epic created a separate weapon with a 3-round burst to function similar to the way it used to. Now, for some reason, they completely nerfed the damage, so the weapon was horrible. Almost as horrible as you not using code Tedesco in the item shop to support me. Anyway, the Chapter 1 burst was never great, but at least usable. This OG season version was just garbage, but again, it was different. The grappler got changed from 10 uses to 20 and now prevented fall damage, so it's weird that they were willing to do that in the first place but then not go all in. The bursts and scoped ARs were atrocious. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. We all loved abusing the new buffed version of the semi-auto sniper, and I definitely preferred the updated Chapter 3 version of the grenade launcher compared to the original, but the fact is that a solid amount of items just did not feel like they did in Chapter 1 or weren't even brought back at all. If a more refined and simple loot pool was the goal, having the OG season rotate from seasons 3 to 6 could have worked better. To top it off, we had the grapple glove from Chapter 3 and the motorcycle from Chapter 4. I actually thought that they fit really well with the Chapter 1 gameplay, but their inclusion is just really confusing. Now, as far as gameplay went, I didn't mind sprinting and mantling on the Chapter 1 map. I don't think anyone disliked it, and I'll go as far as to say I would have liked a more updated Chapter 1 map with a loot lake that you could actually swim in. But I guess an issue is that would be confusing to be able to swim in loot lake but not in the water at the edge of the map. Speaking of which, all the infinite rifts around the map. So I guess the reason for this is if you fall down in zero build, you'd have no way to get back up, so you could use these rifts. Sure, but it was still an issue in Chapter 1 even with builds. If you fell down without having any materials, you were just screwed. And to be honest, skill issue. Don't fall in those spots. Now, I didn't hate these rifts. They were obviously great for rotating. I don't understand why they need to be infinite though, and why Epic just didn't use more zip lines and ascenders instead. Also wanted to mention, if you're enjoying this video, you could subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot. When it comes to making the map accurate, I genuinely have no idea how or why they messed up some of the buildings in Tilted or Fatal with last year's OG season. Prefabs like the pirate camps we can just write off as being lazy, but the fact that other inconsistencies are so small yet noticeable makes them all the more confusing. So I guess we just hope hope they get this map right, and I think they will. If there's anything they mess up, it'll probably just be forgetting about the Ego outpost or making them all identical like the pirate camps. And when it comes to map updates in the middle of the season, POIs will have to be replaced. I get what they were trying to go for last year. The season 5 map is the base, so at any point you can still drop at iconic places like Greasy Grove or Tilted Towers, even though they ended up being removed during chapter 1. But the entirety of chapter 2 focused on locations constantly changing and being replaced, so that formula will not work here. We're gonna have to see season 1's island replaced by the agency to then be replaced again by the authority. We'll probably end up getting a really faithful recreation of the season 1 map, which, by the way, for as much hate as the chapter 2 map got, I actually really liked it on launch. It's pretty grounded and diverse. It just got boring playing on the exact same map for 2 years straight. Season 2 should bring us to the 5 different boss locations, and season 3 is kind of a toss-up. It's in between either the flooded map from day 1 of chapter 2 season 3, which would probably be the much more interesting pick, or the final version, which is basically just the regular chapter 2 map with everyone's favorite location in the top left.
What? No, dude!
Now, the flooded version I think would actually be really cool to go back to, and is pretty much what people picture when they think about the season, but being that the only map change we got on the OG season for seasons 9 and X was the meteor in the sky, Epic's probably going to go the boring route and just give us a normal version of the map. The version of the map that also introduced cars and the bigger gas stations, and it makes you think, will cars be in OG chapter 2 right from the start? They're a brand new cosmetic that Epic has been trying to sell for the last year, and to just remove all battle royale car cosmetic functionality for a few weeks might not be the smartest decision, but who knows. The lack of mobility in chapter 2 season 1 was one of that season's biggest complaints, but it made for really unique long and mid-range fights. Onto the loot pool, and I don't see a way Epic can mess this up. Season 1 kept it simple, balanced, and for the most part these weapons function pretty similar to the way that they did 5 years ago, if not better, like the pistol now being fully auto. The only weapon that's vastly different is the burst AR, and we're eventually going to go into chapter 2 season 3, which is when this weapon got changed to a 2-round burst, so I'd say just keep it as a 2-round burst for the entirety of this season. Season 2, this is what everyone is waiting for, right? Some of you also might have noticed that this is a 4-week season, but only covers seasons 1, 2, and 3, so how are they going to be broken up? Well, apparently season 2 will last for 2 weeks, covering half of this OG season, so we better hope they don't mess this up. When it comes to the loot pool, again, almost everything is the same. I can see decoy grenades not coming back, as I'm pretty sure they're removed from the files, but we gotta talk about Midas drum gun. Every mythic iteration of the drum gun after this one has been a nerfed version. Even when the original Midas drum gun returned for chapter 4 season 4, it just had the stats of the Jules drum gun, so it was the nerf version. Just bring it back. OG stats. The current mythic drum guns are just so mid, so what do I think will end up happening? I'd say it's a 50-50 chance. Epic knows the hype surrounding this weapon, the hype for chapter 2 season 2 as a whole, and at the same time they still shit the bed when they brought this weapon back in the heist season, so really, who knows. Moving on to season 3, and probably my least favorite chapter 2 meta, but that was mainly due to the TAC being a marshmallow shooter and the charged shotgun being really clunky, but in the state that they're in right now, I think they're both pretty decent, though I still don't want to use the charge. Again, I don't see decoy grenades coming back, and also the upgrade bench. This one is interesting. So in the last OG season, Epic brought back the OG vending machines. Now, for anyone that played the later seasons of chapter 1, you'd know that the vending machines were changed to display 3 choices, and you get to claim 1 for free, then it disappears. And this version would have worked perfect in zero build, but for some reason Epic decided to bring back the first iteration of the vending machine that used materials to buy items. So the upgrade benches at some point were changed to use golds to upgrade your items, and gold did not exist at this point in the game. But seeing what they did with the vending machines, I think there's a good chance we get the original upgrade benches back that charge materials to upgrade or side grade your weapons. And side note, I know that this wouldn't be true to the original season 3, but can we just keep the pump in the game? And Epic, you don't even have to include it in the main loot pool. Just let us grab a charged shotgun and side grade it if we want, please. I really don't want to have to use that weapon ever again in my life. So will OG chapter 2 be good? Yeah, probably. I think the inaccuracies of the OG season came from chapter 1 as a whole being all over the place and hectic and partly outdated, but chapter 2, especially the first 3 seasons, were pretty grounded and should be much easier to bring back. Now, what happens when it's over? In December, we're going to move on to chapter 6. It's probably going to be ass, but is this OG season going to be a yearly thing now? I don't think it needs to happen every year for every single map we've got, but I do think at some point we should see one more OG season. Starting off with chapter 2 season 7, a quick hotfix update leading into chapter 2 season 8, a full downtime update with a cinematic trailer re-showing the end, bringing us into chapter 3 season 1, and finally ending off with chapter 3 season 2 and the collider event taking us into whatever would be next for Fortnite.